cold wind howled across the dark water. It was December 1872. The Atlantic Ocean was a lonely and dangerous place. A ship moved through the heavy waves. Its sails were torn and flapping wildly in the wind. It moved like a blind giant, turning left and right with no clear path. There was no one at the wheel. The sea was in total control. Another ship, named the Dei Gratia, was sailing nearby. The men on this second ship saw the wild movements of the first. They knew something was very wrong. As they got closer, they read the name painted on the side. It was the Mary Celeste. They called out over the loud wind. No one answered. The silence from the wandering ship felt heavy and wrong. 3 men climbed into a small rowboat. They pulled their oars hard against the crashing waves to reach the quiet ship. When they climbed up the wooden side, they found a ghost ship. The deck was wet and empty. The doors were open, swinging back and forth. They walked slowly from room to room. They expected to find sick or sleeping people, but they found no one. The deepest mystery was what they did find. The ship was perfectly safe. It was not sinking. There was a little water in the bottom, but not enough to cause worry. 6 months of food and clean drinking water sat untouched in the storage rooms. The beds were made. Clothes were folded. Everything was right where it belonged. But 10 human beings were missing. Those 10 missing souls were not just names on a list. Captain Benjamin Briggs was known as a smart and careful leader. He did not take silly risks. His wife Sarah was with him. They had brought their little girl, Sophia, who was only 2 years old. 7 strong, hard-working sailors made up the rest of the crew. They were a family of the sea. Now, they were gone. The men searching the ship found the captain's daily record book. The last note was written 10 days earlier, on November 25th. That note said they were near an island, sailing nicely. It showed no signs of fear. There were no warnings of bad storms. There were no calls for help. The story just stopped. For 10 days, the ship had sailed itself. The searchers looked closer at the empty deck. They noticed one very important thing was missing. The single small rescue boat was gone. The heavy ropes that held it were untied, not broken. The people had also taken a special tool used to read the stars and find their way. This meant they did not fall off by accident. They chose to leave. This choice makes no sense. Why would a careful captain put his wife and baby into a tiny open boat in the middle of the huge ocean? The main ship was large, strong, and dry. The little boat was dangerous and small. Stepping off the big ship into the little one was like jumping out of a safe house into a wild storm. The men from the Dei Gratia had to take the empty ship to land. They split their group and sailed both ships to a port in Gibraltar. This was a safe place with courts and lawmen. They hoped the missing people would be there waiting. But the port was empty of any news. The 10 lost souls had not been seen by anyone. The lawmen in Gibraltar started asking hard questions. A powerful man named Frederick Solly Flood took charge. He did not believe it was just a sad accident. He thought something evil had happened. He guessed the crew got angry, hurt the captain and his family, and ran away with the small boat. He wanted to find bad guys to punish. To prove his dark idea, the lawman looked for clues of a fight. He found dark red marks on the wood. He found a sharp sword under a bed. He pointed to deep scratches on the outside of the ship. He said these were clear signs of a terrible battle. For a short time, the world believed this scary story of angry men turning on their leader. But the dark story fell apart under bright light. Smart scientists tested the dark red marks. It was not blood. It was just ordinary rust from old metal. The sword was clean. The scratches on the outside were just normal marks from the wood bending in the water. There was no fight. The lawman had to drop his case. The angry crew idea was dead. With no bad guys to blame, people looked at what the ship was carrying. Deep in the bottom rooms, there were 1,700 large wooden barrels. They were filled with strong, pure alcohol. This was not for drinking. It was used for making other things. When the men checked the barrels, they found that 9 of them were empty. This empty space gave birth to a very strong guess. Alcohol can turn into a powerful, unseen gas. If the gas gets trapped in a tight room, it can blow up with a loud bang. Some people think the barrels leaked. The gas built up. Maybe a small pop or a rush of bad air scared everyone. Imagine the sudden fear. The captain smells the gas. He hears a rumble. He thinks his ship is about to blow into a million pieces. He has to save his wife and baby. He yells for the crew to drop the small boat into the water. They move fast, driven by pure panic. They leave their clothes, their food, and their safe beds behind. They get into the little boat, but they do not want to be left behind completely. The searchers found a long, thick rope tied to the back of the big ship. The other end of the rope was trailing in the dark water, broken. The guess is that the small boat was tied to this rope. They wanted to wait at a safe distance until the gas cleared. Then, the unthinkable happens. The wind suddenly picks up. The big ship catches the wind in its huge sails. It jerks forward with incredible power. The thick rope pulls tight. It snaps. In one terrible second, the connection is broken. The big ship sails away fast. The little boat is left behind, bobbing in the endless cold water. This idea makes sense of the clues, but it leaves a cold feeling in the heart. What must it have been like for those 10 people? They watched their safe home float away over the edge of the world. They had no food. They had no real shelter. They were alone with the deep ocean below them and the wide sky above. We must also think about the ocean itself. The sea is a wild, unpredictable force. It does not follow human rules. Some experts wonder if a freak event of nature caused the panic. A sudden earthquake deep under the water could send a massive shock up to the ship. This would shake the wood and make a terrible noise, making them think the ship was breaking apart. Another idea points to a waterspout. This is a spinning tornado that forms over the water. If a waterspout passed close by, it would suck the air up and make a deafening roar. It could pull water out of the bottom of the ship, explaining the confusing water levels found later. The sheer terror of the spinning wind could drive any person to flee. Whatever chased them off, the result was absolute silence. Not one piece of the small boat was ever found. Not one life jacket washed up on a beach. The 10 human beings simply vanished from the face of the earth. The sea swallowed them whole and kept its secret. The lack of any pieces is what makes the story so hard to accept. The big ship was cleaned up and sold. It sailed again for many years. But sailors are very careful people who believe in signs. They thought the ship was cursed. New crews were always nervous. The ship had many small accidents. No one wanted to own the vessel that had eaten its first family. Years later, the cursed ship met its final end. A bad captain tried to crash it on purpose to steal money from an insurance company. He drove it into sharp rocks near an island. Even then, the ship refused to sink right away. It sat on the rocks, slowly breaking apart, until the ocean finally took it back. While the wood and cloth rotted away, the pain of the lost family stayed fresh. Back on land, the relatives of the captain and his wife waited for letters that never came. They had to live the rest of their lives not knowing. A sudden death is a terrible shock, but an unexplained disappearance is a wound that never closes. This open wound is why the story refuses to fade into history. It forces us to look at the limits of what we know. We have big computers and fast planes. We think we have mapped every inch of the world. But the great waters still hold places where human eyes cannot see and human rules do not work. When you stand on a beach and look out at the flat line where the water meets the sky, you are looking at a great blank space. It is beautiful, but it is also terrifying. It is a place where a heavy wooden ship can float for weeks with no one steering. It is a place where 10 lives can be erased in a single afternoon. The details refuse to fit neatly into any box. If they left in a panic, why did they take the time to bring the special tool for the stars? If they left calmly, why did they leave their warm coats in the cold winter? Every answer creates 2 new questions. The puzzle pieces belong to different games. Perhaps the truth is a mix of many small mistakes. A little gas, a sudden noise, a broken rope, a fast wind. A chain of tiny bad luck events that added up to a total disaster. This idea is almost scarier than a sea monster or an angry crew. It means that total ruin can happen just from bad timing. We want the world to make sense. We want causes to have clear effects. When we find a warm cup of coffee on an empty desk, we expect someone to come right back. When we find an empty ship with perfectly made beds and 6 months of food, our brains scream that something is deeply broken in the rules of the world. The ghost ship remains a dark mirror. It shows us our own deep fears of losing control. It reminds us that our safety is just a thin shell. We build strong walls and heavy boats to keep the wild outside away. But sometimes the wild wins. Sometimes the people just disappear, leaving only the quiet creak of wood on the water. The missing small boat, the untouched cargo, the silent logbook. These facts sit in the history books, staring back at us. They do not change. They do not offer comfort. They just wait for the next person to try and solve the puzzle. And every time, the puzzle wins. The story of the lost crew will never truly end. As long as ships sail across the deep, dark spaces of the globe, the shadow of that empty deck will follow them. The wind will always whisper through the ropes, asking the same question. Where did they go? The ocean knows, but the ocean never speaks.